Okay, so now again we'll try to pay and see what happens. So I'm going to click on deposit and then enter the amount, then the email. Okay, so I'll enter the email and then verification code and then confirm payment. So let's see what happens. And there you go. You can see it now deposits money in the user's account, right? So basically that was the process of integrating a new payment method into a goldsvet application. We have now integrated this method and somebody can successfully pay. Now in case you want to add a payment method into your goldsvet application or any other application, you can always reach out to me and I can do that integration for you at a fee. Thank you so much. So in this video we are going to look at how you can integrate a new payment method into your goldsvet application. So for now you can see that these are the default payment methods. We have the Intercasa, we have the Coinbase, we have the BTC pair, right? So for you to integrate a new payment method, the first thing you need to do is to identify this page and add. Of course these are fake credentials, so don't use them, but then we need to identify this page and then add the configurations for our payment method. So let's do that. So to identify, you go to the web.php, and then if you type payment here, you see we have these. We have each one of them has actually these are just callback URLs, but you need to identify the payment route inside the settings route. So you can see that our routes are customized. So for example, to get that page, to get this page, which is payment page, we have gotten this route, settings, and then the tab. So we look for the tab called settings. So let's just open this controller, and then there's a method called general. So copy that, search for that controller, settings controller, and then there is a method called general. And you can see that on this method called general, there is this tab that is saying if tab is equals to payment, so meaning that this is the one that handles or shows the page for payment methods. And then so let's just identify the file that is served, which is here. You can see this is the view that is served, right? All right, so we'll just copy that, and then we search for settings. Okay, we can just search for it manually, so we can go to resources, and then we have views, we have backend. Under backend we have settings. You can see you have settings, then you have payment. I think it is payments if I'm not wrong. Payment. And you can see you have this page. So you can see you have this page. All right, so what we need to do now is to update this page. Now that you have found that page where there is that, now that you have found the page that is displaying the payment methods, we need to add that other method that we like to add here. So for example, you can see this is for Intercasa, this is for Coinbase, right? So we need to update this page. But before we update that page, you can see that the payments methods are coming from the settings. So you need to get to the config file, and then you need to add that other payment method, right? So let's go config file, config.payments. okay, so inside the config we have a file called payments. You can see our payments. These payments contain the configuration for payments. So in this file now we need to add the configuration for the new payment method that we would like to integrate. So let's just copy Coinbase, then paste below. So these are the fields that are required, right? For that, the fields that are required for that payment method that you would like to add. Okay, so the fields that are required for that payment method is the public key, right? So if we go to the API of the payment method that you want to integrate, you can see the documentation here, and you can also see that what is required is the public key. So for this method, it only needs one thing, which is the public key. And then these are the things. For example, this is the callback URL. You don't have to specify the callback URL in the settings, so you just need the public key. So we just copy that public key, and then we go to the payments, and the only field that is required is the public key. And the one that is required, the field that is required is the public key. And then we don't need the API key, so instead of API key, it is just the public key. And then we remove this one because we don't need that. And this one, instead of Coinbase, we can just put another method like Xcash. Okay, you can just put Xcash as the method that you are going to use, but you can change that. Now that you have updated this payments configuration file, we need to go back to the file. We need to go back to the payments .blade.php that is inside the settings, and we need to copy this Coinbase and paste below it. Now this one will be for each payments dot, remember we named it Xcash, so here we change it to Xcash dot fields. So instead of Coinbase, it is Xcash, or the name of the method that you like to add there. Alright, settings, get value, Xcash. Now another thing is that I think we need to name this Xcash. But then another thing is that we need to update the setting table to have that method. So for example, you can see the setting here. So we need to check the setting. Now this is actually checking whether a payment method has been enabled or not. So for example, you can see these other payment methods have been disabled. All right, so we need to add that payment method, and we can just call it, I want to add manually, but there are many ways you can do it. It is not recommended to do it manually, but there is a way you usually do it. So let me just add manually and then set it to enable by default. Okay, so I'll do this. I go to the structure, not structure, I go to the insert tab, and then I can just add payment underscore Xcash, and the value is 1. So value 1 means it is enabled, and then I save it. So having saved that, if I go back to the settings, you realize that we have another field. You can see I've added another field that is called payment Xcash. So this is very important, because if you look at this code, you can see that it is checking if that method is enabled or it is not enabled, right? So let us update the code and see if that method will appear. Now you can see that after doing the updates, we have that the payment method here. It requires the public key. So whoever is so somebody can just enter the public key and then save the settings. Now there are things that you need to know. First, you need to update you can see you have the payments.blade.php inside the backend. We have updated that, and you also have the payment.blade.php. You also have that. You also need to update that. So once you update this, I said you also need to update the config payments.php. You can see added the method that we wanted to add, the payment method. And another thing you need to update, you also need to update the database. You saw that you added that payment, you added payment underscore xcash on the database settings table, and we set it to true. So we need to do that. All right. So let's go to the web, the routes. And if we search settings, if you go to the payment, you can see you have the payment methods here. So we need to add the callback URL. So this is going to be for the callback URL, meaning that once somebody has paid using the payment method that we've added, they need to send data to application. So that is what we call the payment, the callback URL. Okay. Now we need to add the callback URL for that method. So let's just copy this, and then we need to change from this to xcash. And then for the controllers, you need to make sure they are in capital. So one of them is going to be the callback URL. So for example, you can see this is the post method. The post method is going to receive data from the payment method after somebody has successfully paid. All right. So that is why we have that the callback URL. Now that we have updated, we have added the callback URL route, success and fail route. We need to go to, we need to go to the payment namespace, and then need to create the xcash controller. So it is in the same namespace as the Coinbase controller. So what we need to do is just to create a new file and call it xcash controller.php. And then we'll basically copy the Coinbase controller and go to xcash controller and paste there. Okay. And then we need to change this from the name of the class to xcash. Now, another thing we need to do, we need to look at how the functionality is working, and then we need to update it. Okay, you know, this one is just the Coinbase controller functionality, but the xcash payment method might be different from the Coinbase. So we need to look at the functionality and then we update it accordingly, right? So let me do that. Now, one thing I want to say is that you can see this index method. This index method handles the callback data. So that is, after somebody has paid, there is the callback data that's going to be sent to this method for processing the payment. But before that, we need to initialize the payment, right? So for initialization of the payment, only the user can do that. And you can see that on this page here, you can see that that payment method needs to appear here, right? It needs to appear here. So for example, when somebody deposits, that should be among the methods that are appearing here. So now we are going to go and add the code on this method so that that payment method can appear here. Let's do that. Now you can see it is inside, it's most likely inside this logged in header. Okay, you can see we have my account, and this, I think this is the model. So on this model you need to look for the, try to look for intercursor. You can see here intercursor. You can see the coin page, you can see this. So we need to add the settings for the new method that we added. So we need to just copy this, and then we paste below it, and then so this is going to be payment underscore xcash, and then here we call it xcash. Alright, so that is the first place you need to change. Then the next instance, alright, so under deposit you can see this is another code that you need to change. So you can see the Coinbase, if the method is available Coinbase, and we need to copy this code, and then below that, or we can just look for the pin. I don't know where the pin is. This is the pin. So let's copy for the pin, and then just paste below. So instead of payment pin, we can change this to payment xcash. So I think that is all you need to update on this page, and then after updating, let's see how it looks like. Now after a few edits here and there, you can see now if we click on the deposit button, you can see we have this payment method has appeared here, and it needs the account cash, it needs the xcash account email. So we'll go back and then add that field, and now you can see that we've added the amount field, and also you've added the x account email field. Alright, now that you've done that, we need to do the implementation. The implementation is that when somebody clicks on this initiate payment, we need to write the functionality to handle that request, right? So let's look at, let's go to that page again, and let's look for the route. So this is the route that the data this is the route that the data is posted to. Alright, you can see this route. So we need to go to the web.php file, and then we need to search for this route. You can see this is the balance, okay, and then the post method. So it is now the games controller balance add. So you need to search for that method, game controller. I think it is the front end, game controller, and then balance add. So the method is called balance add, and you can see that this is the method that handles the adding of the balance, right? So you need to study the functionality, and then so let me just study the functionality a little bit, and then I'll come back. Now the most interesting in terms of the integration of this controller is this code. You can see here it is where it checks if you can see here it is where it checks the payment method being used, and you can see it checks if the payment method is intercursor, and then here it checks if the payment method is Coinbase. Alright, and you can see it checks the other methods. So let's just copy we need just to copy the Coinbase functionality up to here, and then we'll just paste below, but then instead of the Coinbase we need to put our payment method. Alright, I'm just using this xcash, actually it's not a payment method, so this will be payment underscore xcash, and then it's available. Okay, in case there is any error, it redirects, and then Here is Xcash. Okay. So if that method is not enabled in the system, it will return an error. And then if not, we now create that payment. Okay, you can see we create the payment, the currency, the system is going to be Xcash. Okay, the shop ID. Now here is where now it gets interesting. You can see this place is where it gets interesting, because this is now where we send a request to the payment method to make it pay, right? This is the request. This is when we now send the request to the payment method URL to request a payment. Now this code is going to change, and the reason is that the payments methods are not the same. So this is for the Coinbase, but then for our payment method it will have to change. All right. So for our payment method, for example, we don't need this. We don't need this. We need, here it is public key. You remember we added the public key. So here is going to be the public key, and there's going to be the Xcash. And so this line of code, it is basically getting the API key. It is basically getting the public key from the database, and we are sending that in the headers. Okay. Yeah. And then we need to post. So for this case we post here, but then for our method we use the payment URL, and then here we define the fields that are required. So this unique identifier, we can make it to be the payment ID. You can see the payment ID, because that is the unique identifier of that payment. So just copy this and we change this to the payment ID, and this is the amount. So the amount, we have it here. So here we need, you can see here we have these three URL that are needed. This is for the cancel URL, this is for the success URL, and this is for the callback URL or the result URL. So we are going to change this. So you can change, but I'm going to write a function that is going to just return the current domain, and then we get the success, and then the cancel and the fail URLs. So let me pause for a little bit. Now let's just stick to the camel case, and let's just stick to this. I think it is called the snake case. So you can copy that and then replace this IPN URL, and then cancel URL, and finally the success URL. But remember, this is not important because it depends on the payment method you are integrating, right? So we are getting everything right here. And now let's work on the username and the username. So you can see that this is the username. So here is going to be auth user and then name. That is the name of the customer, and then the email of the customer is going to be, it's not going to be the name of the email of the name of the customer is not going to be the name of the currently logged in user. I mean the email, I'm talking about the email. It is not going to be the email of the currently logged in user, because normally users can use different email when logging in different systems. So we are the email of the customer, we want to use the email. We want to use this email, request email, right? we want to use the email the user has provided. Okay, so it is request email, the email the user has provided, right? Request email. So as I've said, all these details depend on the payment method you are integrating, right? Now that we have this data, we can send the request using the same method used in the Coinbase. So cut this, and after cutting that, come down here and paste it. Now you can see that when we try paying, so let's try to like deposit amount using the method that you've integrated. Let's say $400, and then these are just test emails. So let me try to initiate payment, and you can see it redirects me to that payment method. And let me just get the test details. I have the test email for this payment method, and then I click next, and then I need to enter verification code, but this depends on the payment method that you are using. Then so I click on confirm payment, and so you can see it will redirect me back to the site. It redirects the user back to the site, and it says that money has been added to your account. However, you can see that the balance is still zero. You can see the balance is still zero, and the reason is that we have not handled the callback data that comes. If we go to another thing, you need to add the route that we added on the web. You see on the web we added these X routes. For the post route to go through without the CSR ref token verification, you need to go to this middleware and then add this route, the route for the payment method that you are trying to add. And then we can go to Xcash controller, and then on the Xcash controller you can see this the data that you are trying to log, but then we need to find that data and go through that data and then save it to the database. So I'll be back in a while. Okay, so now I have changed the functionality to suit the callback data that we receive from the callback from the payment gateway. So basically it comes, you convert to JSON, and then we have written this function. I've written this method. Actually, it checks if the request has status, and the status is equals to success. It checks the identifier. Identifier basically is the payment ID, right? And then if it passes all the validations and it gets here, it checks even the amount, if the amount is same. Now we can do the payment. So get the user, and then after that we add the balance, and yeah, right? So that's what happens. So let's try and see if it's going to deposit that money in the account of the user. So let's go. So click on the deposit button, Xcash, and then let's do $600, and then let me just use an email, test email, and then initiate. It redirects me here, and then go back here. So I'll enter the email, and then I'll enter the verification code for test account is 222666. So let me try to confirm payment and see. Okay, so now that I've updated the index method of the Xcash controller, I want to try again. So there was an error that was being caused by calling the add balance method in the user model, but I decided to just do the update from this controller. So let's test the payment and see how it works. Okay, so now again we'll try to pay and see what happens. So I'm going to click on deposit and then enter the amount, then the email. Okay, so I'll enter the email and then verification code and then confirm payment. So let's see what happens. And there you go. You can see it now deposits money in the user's account, right? So basically that was the process of integrating a new payment method into a goldsvet application. We have now integrated this method and somebody can successfully pay. Now in case you want to add a payment method into your goldsvet application or any other application, you can always reach out to me and I can do that integration for you at a fee. Thank you so much.